Sir.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, sir. I'm Jyotsna.
Hey, morning, Jyotsna.
Yeah. So welcome back, participants, for the session 2. I have the honor of introducing you to Dr. Vinosh Babu James Garu, Associate Director, Technical Standards at Qualcomm India, Bangalore. Sir is going to talk to us on Introduction to Massive MIMO, Millimeter Wave Communications, and Cooperative MIMO. So Vinosh Garu leads the technical standards engagement for Qualcomm in India. Over the last 15 years, he has participated in technical standards engagements at the ITU, 3GPP, and IEEE. He also engages with Indian and regional stakeholders on matters related to radio standardization, harmonization, and regulation. Vinosh Garu joined Qualcomm in 2011, and he has served in several roles spanning engineering and standardization. He has a PhD in electrical engineering from IIT Madras with specialization in wireless communication. His PhD work was on cooperative pre-coding, and his findings were very relevant for 5G network planning. He has held several technical roles in the past, including serving as the chairman of 5G working group in TSDSI, and currently he serves as the chairman of Future Communication Technologies in TEC. He is also the convener of 5G India Forum, a technical expert group hosted by the COAI. He holds several patents and international publications to his name. He is also a senior member of IEEE. Welcome you, sir. I request you to take over the session.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning to all the participants. It's a pleasure to join you on this faculty development program. Although we are not able to see each other, I just hope that the next 90 minutes we'll spend it usefully and try to get across something useful to you guys. Let me just share my screen. Okay. I hope it's visible. Jyotsna, can you confirm that you're able to see my screen? Okay, so somebody is able to see it. Good. So here is the good and bad part to it. First, let's begin with the bad part. I can't see if you are actually posting meeting chat, asking questions or other things when I'm actually sharing. So somebody should actually hold that responsibility and then bring it to my knowledge that there's a question which need to be responded. I don't know who did it yesterday and in the previous session. So I would request you continue to do that. The good part, I'm not going to delve into too much details. I'm going to keep it at the introductory level. The objective is not to actually show that I know stuff. The objective is trying to see if I can actually get you used to some knowledge which can help you use them someday, right? So I'm going to focus on mostly the basics and then connect to these three things, massive MIMO, millimeter wave, and cooperative MIMO, into the theme of your workshop, which is adaptive machine learning and other related things. So let's get started. The session agenda, I will be focused on mostly MIMO fundamentals, trying to explain why that field is still relevant today, and then get into mapping that to massive MIMO, millimeter wave communication, cooperative MIMO, and then hopefully in the end or during the middle, we take a few more questions on the route. So this is the main discussion we try to have in cellular system planning, right? So what are the degrees of freedom we have with network planning? So the wireless communication network or wireless communication system we study as part of curriculum, that is very different from what actually operators see in the field, right? Simple things like, when you're actually dealing with Rappaport or some other wireless communication book, every cell planning is done assuming that you have perfectly laid hexagonal cells and that you miraculously have a tower in the middle of it, and that tower starts serving the geography it is connected to. It doesn't take into account the capacity load or interference or a lot of other problems that come in the way. So the first issue we try to address is, what is the main problem the operator is trying to address in the technical part, right? The technical query he is trying here, the operator is trying to answer is, I need to deploy a network, and that network need to provide a certain throughput or a bit rate, whatever you want to call it. And that throughput is what revenue I will actually earn from it. Because if there are more throughput, then I can basically serve more customers. I can put them in more basic plans. Or I can have one large enterprise customer who will take away entire bandwidth, but he will still pay me what is needed. So when he does the network planning, this is how he broadly divides his metrics. So the throughput to be delivered in a particular area, it's actually a function of the spectrum available with him, how densely he has packed the cells, and then what is the spectrum efficiency guaranteed by the deployment he is planning. Going a little in depth into what exactly that would be, he has a certain quantum of spectrum. That particular aspect is not going to change. But then when it comes to cell density, he can actually reconfigure his networks, right? So as you see in the picture above, you can have macro cells, larger ones, if you are actually having lesser user density, right? So this is more like your outskirts or places, where the population is less, like, tier one villages, those sort of places, there is a decent number of people, decent number of pay, but then, it's not like high-rise buildings, or it's not like people going to office, or, a large number of people crowded up in places like schools, uh, um, colleges, hospitals, temples. It's not those sort of places. It's just like flat terrain. The moment you try to talk about crowded places like in schools, colleges, stadiums, and other related things, you need to have smaller cells because you are going to suddenly add capacity in there. And then you have to do frequency reuse. That's like the basic mantra idea, right? And then as more and more users come in, then you start splitting it into what is called as picocells. So picocells, microcells, macro cells, large cells, this is how the cell density and cell planning actually go in. I'm actually not interested in that part also. I'm interested to see how can I actually leverage the existing spectrum and the cell and start offering larger spectrum efficiency. So if I want to offer more and more spectrum efficiency, that is where MIMO comes in. What is MIMO? We will explain it in the next slide. But generally explaining, that is where we are targeting. And it all boils down to our very old formula, which was called the Shannon capacity formula, which basically told that, the capacity in a system is a function of the bandwidth, and it's a function of the power levels in there, noise, and other related factors. To be specific, we are interested in this particular part with respect to MIMO. What happens to the signal to noise ratio? How do I get to improve it in a wireless system? And how do I use multiple antennas to actually help me in that part? So MIMO actually is targeting improving reliability through diversity methods, or in actually multiplexing more spatial streams. So let's get into a little more deep depth of it, right? So MIMO, which stands for multiple input, multiple output, is basically converting this problem of a single transmitter, single receiver, using a wireless channel to start communicating using multiple antennas at the transmitter and at the receiver. Okay. So this is like the motherhood problem statement, like what they'll say that, in one line, can you explain MIMO so that nobody understands it? This is that one line, right? I'm pretty sure that, folks who have understood or learned MIMO may be getting a feel for what this is. But for the rest, this is like a very blank statement, right? No surprises in here. So just to put things in perspective, what has changed between diagram 1 and diagram 2? This is what has changed. In MIMO communication, we actually send the same stream of data, same information, simultaneously through multiple antennas while using the same channel. So here you had a fading channel. Here it's the same fading channel. Nothing changed. On the same channel, you are actually starting to send more and more streams. So this is a form of antenna diversity which uses multiple antennas to improve the signal strength or the RF link reliability, right? What do I mean by that? Let's assume that, hypothetical case, these 4 antennas are actually sitting in 4 corners of your building. And this is like 4 antennas in some distant building. In all likelihood, there is going to be one antenna which is actually going to see the antenna from the other building from a line of sight perspective, which means there is a suitable gain. The other antenna will be definitely shielded out because it's actually behind that building, right? Now change the analogy from buildings to your handset itself, that you have a phone, you have multiple antennas. Let's assume hypothetically that you have antennas at 4 corners of the phone. When you talk, you are not going to float the phone, instead you are going to hold the phone. So the moment you actually hold the phone, your thumb is actually going to shield a couple of antennas. That is very similar to what analogy we explained using the building, right? So you are going to actually have some good links and some bad links. So how did it help between this diagram and this diagram? In this particular case, what happens if you had actually shielded the antenna using your palm, right? So in this particular case, the signal is actually totally lost. But in the new case, since you actually have a few antennas which are actually not corrupted by or shielded by your palm, you get a little more reliability. Now you try to map that into some of the use cases you will be considering. You will be able to find out, okay, this is probably where I'm actually using it, right? So an alternate approach is, instead of actually sending the same data stream, you actually now say that, okay, I have 4 antennas. So in theory, I can actually send 4 different data streams. Is it possible to do it? The answer is again yes. If you are actually having very good links, 4 of them, you can actually use that to send these particular strings. There is obviously, trouble on the receiver. No surprises in here, right? Because if 2 people start speaking in the class, and then as a student trying to understand what both the teachers are speaking, then that student basically needs additional qualifications. The same way, if you are actually transmitting more and more data streams, independent ones, then the receiver is actually going to be a little complicated, because in addition to additional AWGN noise at the receiver, you have to deal with a lot more which is actually coming because of the wireless channel behavior. So let's get into a few MIMO fundamentals, which is the main aspect I am going to bang on, because if you're thorough with this, then the 3 concepts which I want to explain is like cakewalk. So I'm actually going to try and see if I can actually get you some of the insights which I want to share. So in 4 different tracks, let's try to discuss them. We have what is called a SISO. SISO stands for single input, single output. So basically I'm having a single input antenna. I have a single output antenna. Why this matters? Because this is like the basic baseline wireless communication system you're dealing with. And it is that particular wireless system which also tells you that wireless communication is not a miracle, but it's a special case of digital communication. Why? You had a transmitter, you had a receiver, and then there is a fade channel in between. Translate it into whatever digital communication you study. There is a transmitter, there is a channel. Wired, wireline doesn't matter for the digital communication system. It's just a channel. As long as you know the channel, you will be able to perform digital communication. And then you know that since this is digital communication, there is a front-end noise which gets added. You can't have any properties other than statistical associated with it. So in the worst case, you try to claim that this is additive white Gaussian noise. In the best case, you start calling it something else, saying that it has colored properties, so I will be able to whiten it a little better. and then it actually goes to the receiver. So in summary, you have a X of t signal coming in, it gets convolved with the channel H of t, and then the output Y of t comes. If you are studying wireless communication, depending on the property of H of t, S of t, and Y of t, you will actually study several different channels, several different equalization, and several different approaches to it. So the key lesson I want you to take from this slide is communication on a fading channel gets reduced to doing digital communication with a fading coefficient. And the key message I want to also convey in here is the capacity of this particular system. So I have a single channel H of t between transmitter and the receiver. In this particular case, the capacity of the system is given as a function of the log to the base 2. And what you actually see is it's a function of SNR and the fading channel coefficient. So this guy is the culprit who actually decides whether our wireless system is good or bad. Signal to noise ratio is a function of transmit power and then how much receive noise you are able to handle. But the channel, it's a statistical channel and you have absolutely no control over it. If you have a good channel, then great, because you will be able to exploit more capacity. But if it happen to be a bad channel, then you will actually lose the signal you actually transmitted. So that is the problem MIMO actually tries to address. How do we actually increase the reliability of this particular channel? So let's try to add more antennas at the receiver and then try to see how this problem statement changes. So I have still one transmit antenna, but then I decide, okay, let me deal with more receive antennas. How does this help? When you actually have more receive antennas, the simplest system design can do a gated approach. Meaning, if I have the means to find out what H1, H2, H3, etc. up to HNR are, I can try to find out which one of these links is the best and then try to clock that alone. Right? Say, for example, if H10 is like the best channel, I can use the receiver chain to basically get onto that and then use that for communication. So what has happened? I have used what is called a selection diversity to basically improve the reliability in my link. It actually sounds stupid, right? Because if you are actually having multiple receive antennas, why do you want to actually pick up only one? Is there a particular reason somebody would want to actually do it? It turns out that this choice is actually a system implementation choice. Rational. If you have multiple transmit antennas and receive antennas, then you need to have multiple transmit and receive chains as well. Meaning that mod, demod corresponding to each antenna or the LNA, power amplifier, you have to have dedicated ones for each of the antenna. But for example, if you decide that, I have only one LNA, I have only one receive chain, I have only one PA and other related things, that is when you try to do the antenna selection. You pick up one antenna, which is the RF part, and then connect it to the LNA. And then everything is like a CISO channel, single input, single output, except that now we can actually do selection diversity, meaning write on the best channel that is actually possible. I can actually do something better than that as well. That is when I have multiple receive links. I have multiple low noise amplifier, multiple PA, multiple demod blocks, all those things. In that particular case, I can do what is called as a maximal ratio combining. Right? This is your MRC receiver or things that you actually deal with day in and day out. So how do we actually understand these two behavior that, the antenna selection and the maximal ratio combining? I have basically given two channel realizations in here. Let's just say the blue channel is from your first link and the red channel is from your second antenna. When you say that I am doing antenna selection, you are basically riding on the best channel. So for a certain duration or a certain frequency, you choose blue. and then you switch over to red, blue. You try to always write the best part of the channel. That is your antenna selection diversity. If you can actually do MRC combining, then you basically exploit both these gains. So what that basically means is if you have a good channel, put more power in there. If you have a bad channel, you actually put less power in there. But since you are doing it a statistical channel, you basically get something in the form of diversity combining, which you get to do, right? And statistically, it has been proved that that's the best combiner and other related things. So what changed between the previous capacity and this particular capacity? The big difference is this summation factor coming in here. When I do maximal ratio combining, I'm basically combining the benefits of all the channels available in here. So the reliability scales as a function of the number of receive antennas. That is what single input, multiple output, which is designed to yield receiver diversity, tries to do. Moving into the next one, where I'm saying that, okay, great, I can do receive diversity, which is good, right? So for example, this can be my mobile and this can be a base station, right? So the base station can actually have multiple antennas because it's bulky, it can actually host it, operator can actually invest in these sort of things. The question is, how do I actually translate it to a reverse problem? Meaning, can I actually have multiple antennas at the transmitter in the downlink part and then still deal with one antenna at the receiver, typically my handset? In this particular case, there's a key difference, right? So since the number of antennas in this pair is the same, you get the same diversity, but the crucial catch is that power available at the transmitter is actually fixed. So that needs to be divided among all the empty transmit antennas now. So if you compare the previous diagram with this particular diagram, the capacity function is the same, except that the SNR is scaled down by the number of transmit antennas. Then what we intend to do in here is send redundant version of the same signal over multiple time slots and through multiple antennas. So this is what happens. You have your transmit diversity encoder. You actually send them to the receiver based on statistical aspect. So I'm here to introduce two new concepts. One is called as open loop diversity and the other one is called closed loop diversity, right? So the best analogy in here, right? So we are dealing with a statistical channel, meaning you only have information about the statistics of the the problem statement. So the same way, I know that we are currently having close to about 110 faculty members and others in this call. I have no idea if they are actually able to understand me, if they are actually listening to me, or if they are actually spending their time on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, complaining that there is a guy actually from Qualcomm making a presentation. I have no idea what he's teaching. Neither do I, because this is actually a open loop diversity scheme. I'm trying to do something assuming that you guys have a certain background, have a certain expectation, and then sending some information related to that. Are you able to process it at the receiver is actually not known to me. That is open loop diversity scheme. I can actually add feedback into the system, meaning the receiver can start telling me that, this particular channel is good, this particular channel is bad. You try to actually adapt a little more power in here, or you try to do, this particular correction or other related things. That is closed loop diversity, right? It can be simple things like, you posting a query or a question or a comment in the chat box. And we try to find out what is that we are getting out of it, right? It's again a greedy algorithm, right? Meaning the moment the transmitter knows that the receiver is providing feedback, we try to find out, you only try to give the creamy information, meaning, you try to say, yes, the channel is good, please pump in this much power. The transmitter still knows that, this particular link is good, but what if I need to actually adapt it to another user or another data stream, or another stuff? So it will still have to be conservative. The implication in here is in a closed loop diversity scheme, you can actually improve the reliability and performance, It is definitely going to be better than open loop diversity scheme. But then there are always pros and cons to it, right? You need to have a dedicated feedback channel. Is it like statistical feedback? It is instantaneous feedback, or is it going to be a lot more feedback you are trying to provide to the user? Nobody knows, right? That's how we actually try to see how this system actually helps. Now getting into the last part, which is the MIMO, where I have multiple input antennas and multiple output antennas. So what is the big difference? The big difference is this is like chaos. There are several links, there are several cross links, and I have absolutely no idea what is the best for it. But what is known is the capacity of this channel is actually well understood. And this basically says that if there is a matrix channel and each channel has a particular agent value, then the capacity actually scales in this particular manner. What is still not known is it actually good for spatial multiplexing? Meaning I try to send different streams in different paths, or do I get to use it for pre-coding, meaning single stream and then try to do something? Here is a metaphor, to basically help you understand where these different schemes are basically handling, right? So when I say single input, single output, this is like saying, you have a bell. It can be a temple bell, it can be a college bell, whatever it doesn't matter. There is a bell, and then you are actually using your ear to actually receive it. It's okay. The moment you try to use both your ears, then the reception is good. You'll be able to make more, intelligence out of it. And it definitely helps because, twice the reception, twice the signal strength, all these things, blah, blah, blah. Great. Natural evolution is what would have happened if I am actually using two bells. Common sense tells us that, if you're actually using two bells, I need to have two circuitry paths connected to it. It's going to consume twice the power. But then it actually offloads part of my problem because in terms of intensity, similar intensity is actually going to reach my ear. And then the thing is you have two bells and then you are using both your ears. Now the obvious question you keep asking is, if I have two bells, should I actually use the same tone which is actually coming in here, or should I actually use it for different things? And that's the same question we tried to answer in the previous slide. Do I need to use both of them to transmit the same information? In which case we are actually improving the diversity. Or if you know that, I'm actually in a very good channel condition, can I basically use them to send two different songs? That is spatial multiplex. Moving into the next level, trying to understand, how antenna actually helps. So MIMO, although it actually brings in gains, is not something you can continue deploying without actually taking a penalty. What do I mean by that? When you design antennas, those antennas are designed for the wavelength. So if you're actually transmitting in low frequency, it would mean the wavelength is large, and it would also mean the dipole corresponding to that will be larger in size. So when you have larger such elements, there is a limitation on how many can you actually pack in a system. Right, so the typical communication provided by your Airtel, Vodafone, Jio, BSNL, whatever it is, it's all in your 1800 band or 2100 band, or if it is LTE, it's 2300, 2500. It's all what is called as sub-6 frequencies. Frequency is low, which means the wavelength is invariably high, which also means you can have only a few number of antennas in this particular case. You can't scale it blindly, arbitrarily, right? So if the key thing, as we get into millimeter wave, this is the particular thing which will actually resonate. When I go to millimeter wave frequencies, the frequency is high, which will mean the wavelength is less, which will mean the dipole corresponding to that is also small, which also then means I can pack more and more small elements into a compact antenna array. So the antenna size influences the choice of MIMO mode you can deploy. So this particular thing, it's actually good to have 2 antennas or 3 antennas if you are using sub-6, right? And the key thing, I would also hope you guys understand and appreciate is one additional dimension comes for free. It's the horizontal and the vertical polarization, because that's an inherent property of the antenna element itself. So if you're having one element and if it has 2 polarization, that serves the purpose of 2 antennas. And the second important property is, depending on how many radiating elements are there in the system, you can actually focus your beam and send it into the direction of the user. So here we have a small comparison which actually takes you from explaining if you have only one radiating element to 4 radiating elements. In the case of one radiating element, you actually have a wide lobe, wide beam, which can only reach a certain distance. But then the moment you use 2 radiating elements, you can actually create a slightly larger main lobe and then go a little more distance than a single element. As I keep adding more and more elements, the side lobe diminishes. I wouldn't say disappears, it diminishes, and the main lobe becomes larger and larger. Right? So these are the 2 properties which we will actually exploit in millimeter wave communication or in massive MIMO communication. Okay. Going further, just to summarize what are the aspects we had actually come across in this fundamental part. There are several benefits that comes because of MIMO. First thing is, as the number of antennas increase, and if you are doing spatial multiplexing, then the corresponding throughput also increases. In large MIMO or massive MIMO cases, the throughput increases linearly with the number of antennas in the system. The key reason why we went for MIMO is just to address the challenges in a fading channel, as you can see in the second figure. If there was no MIMO, the instantaneous channel over time, as a result of fading, can actually deteriorate the signal quality of reception. So if you are in the best part of the channel, very good. But if you happen to end up in a null or other things, which is surely guaranteed in the fading channel, your transmit information will be totally lost. So MIMO in this particular case can actually help improve the reliability of your communication. And the third useful thing MIMO brings in is it actually helps increase the coverage. So if you are actually having just one radiating element and you are doing omni sort of communication, your coverage is actually limited. Whereas if you are actually adding antenna arrays and helping to steer the beam in the direction of the user, you can extend the coverage. And that's the other area where MIMO actually helps. Just checking to see if there are questions, because this is like a logical gap. I'm not seeing anything posted on the meeting chat. So let's go into the next part. In the next part, we discuss massive MIMO. So in massive MIMO, we are slightly changing gears, trying to find out, what sort of use cases or what sort of applications can we actually port for MIMO. Okay, so I see a question being posted. Okay, up to how many antennas can we use to increase capacity? Okay, so we are just getting into that in the upcoming part, Nasser, if that is okay. Right, so I'm going to answer that question in like 2 slides. So here is what we do, right? So what we have seen until now is there is a certain thing called as a MIMO base station, and then there is something called as a MIMO terminal. Let's get a little bit practical in here, trying to understand, what exactly are we trying to deal with now. Let's take a realistic example. The MIMO base station is your cellular operator's tower, right? So you have seen these towers, huge one, bulky ones. You can actually host multiple antennas in there. And the good part is you can also space them, meaning I can actually space them like in a few meters, half a meter, quarter a meter, whatever it is, or a few feet, right? I can actually space them. Let's assume this MIMO terminal is your handset. How far can you actually go? However, I try to space them, it is still going to be on the same handset, which depending on what particular model you are using, the best dimension is not more than a few centimeters. Okay, so when you are actually doing that, the challenge is you don't see independent channels, but what you are actually seeing is a highly correlated channel. Meaning there's no way of actually differentiating one from the other. The flip side to that is if that link happened to be bad, then the link reaching any of those other antenna elements is also likely going to be bad. So you have, although you have multiple antennas at the transmitter and receiver, you haven't reaped the gains of MIMO. But then we have at least understood now that doing MIMO at the base station or having multiple transmit antennas is supposed to bring you some gain. So how do we exploit it? The way you exploit that is you say that I will now include multiple users into the system. So instead of actually treating them as this multiple antennas belonging to the same terminal, we will treat them as multiple antennas belonging to multiple terminals. Okay, this is like the sub-6 behavior, meaning there are distantly spaced antennas communicating on the same time, same frequency, same slot, all those things. Instead of actually trying to fight sending multiple streams to the same user, I am actually now sending multiple streams to multiple users. And using some of the latest innovations which we studied, that if you're actually using beamforming through antenna array and other related things, I am not sending omni beams. I am now capable of sending perfectly formed beams in the direction of these users. That is when the concept of multi-user MIMO forms in, and that is when the concept of massive MIMO also slowly emanates. So answering to your question, okay, too many questions have come, Nasser. So the catch is there's absolutely no limitation on how many antennas can you pack if you are actually doing multi-user MIMO. In the case of multi-user MIMO, what you typically end up, okay, let's come back to this slide in a minute. So if you are actually having multiple antenna elements capable of doing beamforming, then you can actually beam it in the direction of a particular user who is more likely static, or use multiple of them to track fast moving vehicles and stuff like that. To be more clear, you can have base stations with massively arranged antenna elements that are capable of producing multiple beams that can serve individually several of them in the same cell. So the limitation in here is purely in terms of how many of them can you schedule them quickly, faster, and reliably. And that is my first match to the theme of your workshop on how fast can you actually do this particular, where AI and ML can actually help to basically schedule communication networks, right? Because this becomes suddenly like your huge optimization problem, right? So if you want to take analogy of a classroom, it's not like you have disciplined students listening to you. Each of them, this is like an examination hall. Each of them wants to do something very specific. And the base station, in which case the teacher in here, needs to quickly adapt to serving a lot of these customers. Okay, let's come back quickly to this in a bit after addressing this particular question, right? So in terms of single user MIMO and multi-user MIMO, what has basically changed? As we explained earlier, if this happens to be the transmitter, this happens to be the receiver, and you have these fading channel links between them. If the receiver happens to be a small handset, or if you have already shielded it using a POM or other related stuff, it's highly likely that you won't get a rich channel. Instead, you will be getting a correlated channel. So you're basically trying to split them and then treat them as multiple different users with single antennas. And these guys, now you can schedule them in a manner that they are indeed diversity spaced. Okay, that gelled into this. And if you look into the final application on what the other last thing we actually saw, if you have a wide beam and if you're actually doing LTE sort of communication, the only options available to us was either do a mechanical tilting or a electrical tilting. What do you mean by mechanical tilting or electrical tilting? Remember in like 2016-17 when LTE was rolled out in our places, including in Hyderabad and other places, in a particular day you will not get any coverage, and then you complain to the operator that I am not getting any coverage, and then he does something and you miraculously get some signal. All that he is trying to do is trying to geolocate your location and then basically tilt the beam in your direction, so that you are more likely in the eye of the beam and not in the side of the beam. As things change, when you actually bring in more and more antennas in the system, you ended up actually doing what is called a vertical beamforming. And this was helpful, if people are actually in high-rise buildings, right? So I don't know about the situation in Hyderabad and other places, but at least in Bangalore, we have a huge number of high-rise buildings. So when these guys actually deployed their networks, people in like typically 3rd, 4th, 4th floor and below, they had decent reception. But the moment you go for your 10th floor, 12th floor houses or offices or other related places, the signal was terribly bad. So that's when they started using multiple of these elements and then giving what is called as elevated beamforming or vertical beamforming. And then you move into your multiple antenna arrays. You have like huge number of them. You can together do azimuth horizontal or elevation vertical beamforming. And a practical application, you try to get it understood in here. So if there are multiple users in the in the terrain, then you use your azimuth horizontal beamforming to serve them. And if you have people living in high-rise buildings, then you use elevation beamforming to basically serve them. How to calculate directivity for MIMO antennas? The theory is very similar to what we deal with in normal antenna theory, except that you now have a composite beam. So in terms of measurement, you will have some difference, right? So I think it's better we take this offline, if that is okay with you, Dr. Raju. Okay. There are like 3 more questions. What is the best coding technique used in MIMO? Hindumati. Okay. If you are looking into transmit diversity schemes, then the best known and reliable, trustworthy scheme which has been used over at least 10 years now is what is called as the Alamotti scheme or the variants of that, right? A transmit diversity scheme. But if you have pre-coding the way it is defined in the LTE standard, meaning you are able to feedback which is the best channel and which pre-coder to use, then the gain due to that is actually better than the Alamotti scheme. But the catch is you have to give feedback. There are a few more practically feasible transmit diversity schemes available. And there are like tons and tons of them in literature, academic literature to be specific, dealing with like, finding golden codes for space-time communication and other related things. So again, if you're interested, let's connect offline and then I can actually point you in some directions. What is the difference between MIMO and massive MIMO? Okay, absolutely no difference at all. If you're actually having few antenna elements, if you have one element, it is single antenna. If you have more than one element, it is called as multiple antenna. If you have huge number of elements, that it becomes a massive MIMO, right? So just trying to explain with this particular diagram itself. So here you see there is just one element. Let's take time frame, right? This is like your 2006 to 2016 deployments. You saw one tower with one antenna, that's like one element. And then you try to pack more and more antenna elements within the same radiating element, which becomes MIMO. And then you suddenly start having parallel elements like this, huge antenna elements and trying to do something. That's your massive MIMO. Of course, the theory governing that will change because each element will have to be connected to its own modulation path, RF chain, and other related things. I just tried to abstract it to you. Jay Chitran, if that answers your question. Okay, Hindumati, I think I answered. Sangeeta, how to calculate the channel gain for uplink or downlink? Okay, so there are two ways to do it. Depends on if you are using a FDD system or a TDD system. The simplest of that is the TDD system, because in the TDD system, you're using the same time and frequency resource for uplink and the downlink. And why is it simple? Because since it is the same channel and more likely the same multipath in that particular direction, you exploit reciprocity. So from the base station to the UE, whatever channel goes, that is the same you will actually get. Okay. You're asking about full duplex system. Okay, so full duplex is again the same, meaning it's like a TDD system with some special characteristics. You can exploit the diversity, reciprocity of the channel to basically get over that. As per the diagram, I believe. Okay, sir, as per the diagram on your PPT, also as per 3GPP standard, FD MIMO, 3D MIMO, and massive MIMO is same or different. Yeah, so depending on who you talk to, it will be either the same or it will be different, right? So if you're talking to like an antenna company, then it is almost the same thing to them, right? They just repackage it and then give it to you, like your Patanjali products. It's the same stuff you get in your homes, but then you put a wrapper saying that this is Patanjali product, and then you go and buy. That's how that FD MIMO or 3D MIMO and massive MIMO is actually packaged to you. Jana Kumar, I try to understand the question. The same information is broadcasted. Okay, what was your previous question? Okay, there was no question. Can you be a little more clear in here, Jana Kumar? Same information is broadcasted. Which information? Is this the coding information, scheduler information, channel state information? You are talking about MIMO? Okay, let me try to give you a generic answer to it. So if you're talking about MIMO, if it is a TDD system, then from each transmit element to each receive element, you typically know what is the channel path if you are able to design your pilots, right? So that is the key, because each antenna will have its unique pilots, and based on that knowledge of the pilot, you will be able to estimate your channel. Okay. How the direction of the user is sensed to switch the beam in that particular direction. There are tons of literature available on this particular path. The key is, as I answered to Jnana Kumari earlier, each antenna element, or in particular, each user will have their unique pilots. And based on the prior knowledge of these pilots, you will be able to find out which particular direction that user is in and in which particular direction I need to send that particular signal. Right? So things like OTDOA, or direction of arrival, and other related things is purely done on the basis of prior knowledge of the pilot signals or reference signals if you are a 3GPP fan. Okay. Back into this slides. So this is where we actually covered massive MIMO. So as we answered the questions in there, Massive MIMO is like a specific application of MIMO, where we basically leveraged two additional things, that you are actually moving away from low frequency to high frequencies. And because of high frequencies, now you are able to pack more and more antenna elements closer to each other. And the second thing is, because of this packing and because of the way now you are able to create directional beams, you can actually send lot of, you can basically service a lot of subscribers at the same point in time, right? So that is where your massive MIMO comes in picture. And this is actually good for an operator because instead of actually buying more spectrum or trying to do cell splitting, he is able to leverage the antenna dimension to offer more capacity. Okay, so how to allocate power to each user? This question needs to wait for some more time, right? So in theory, you can do anything. So if you look for water filling, dynamic water filling, or literature around that, then that helps you understand how to allocate power dynamically in the system. But the catch is, when you actually come to practical systems, you can't arbitrarily allocate power. Instead, you have to rely on what is called as quantized allocation, right? And the moment you start talking about quantized allocation, that comes to the modulation and coding scheme you are actually employing. Okay. In the uplink, how is it done? In the uplink, I am assuming you're talking about the mobile to the base station. So the mobile to base station, this is like a very old problem. I think Qualcomm was the first to solve it in the CDMA 2000 days. So you would have heard about this thing called near far problem, right? So if you are actually shouting too much, then you are actually interfering with the communication happening in a neighboring cell. So what the base station does is, it tries to find out how near or how far are you from the base station, and then ask you to adaptively increase your transmit power. It's the same near far problem which was leveraged in doing uplink power allocation in LTE or in 5G NR systems. Okay, so if you need more responses to that, you can definitely reach out to me offline. So moving next, we try to get into millimeter wave communication. So the same thing what we discussed in the beginning. The key aspect is two things changing. One is, we are actually slowly moving away from low frequency, high frequency to very high frequency or extremely high frequency communication, right? And to understand millimeter wave basics, we go back to the free space formula and the antenna gain calculation. You would have come across these formula in your life before. So the received power is a function of the transmit power, how large the distance you are covering, and the wavelength and the gains. As you go to extremely high frequency communication, the wavelength is actually becoming very small and small. So if you are actually becoming very small and small, then the received power is also going to diminish. So in order to compensate for this received power, what you end up doing is you add that antenna array and treat that antenna array to basically address a single data stream or a multiple data stream. And through that antenna array, by exploiting the physics of the problem, you also try to increase the receive antenna gain. And that's about everything millimeter wave brings into the picture. In terms of implementation, it adds a few more goodies. What those goodies are is, as the frequencies become very, very high, the wavelength becomes very, very small. They can actually be packed very, very tightly. And the next useful thing is, as you pack them very, very tightly, it allows you to actually create pencil-like beams which can be directed in the direction of the users. So millimeter wave communication systems not only is limited to beamforming, but you can actually do very energy efficient beams sent in the direction of the user. That is the key property the millimeter wave communication brings in, right? And just to give you a perspective on how things changed from the LTE world to the 5G world, you had a few antennas. You are still able to serve the whole cell because you have a omni streams. But because you added more antennas to the array and then you had the capability of doing millimeter wave communication and other stuff, you are actually able to create narrow beams in the direction of the user. So the second advantage is, say for example, it's a lightly loaded cell. You have one user sitting in here. Just to serve that user, you have to waste energy in the direction where there is no communication happening at all. And with millimeter wave communication, what you can do is you can decide that to transmit only this particular beam and then switch off the other beams, which is possible. So this millimeter wave provides mobile operators with a critical competitive advantage in addressing data demands and to expand 5G into fixed wireless enterprise and industrial application. Okay. And this is just giving you a perspective of how much spectrum we have, what can be used, what cannot be used, right? So up to 3 gigahertz is where, at least in India, we have done cellular communication, right? So the highest band is used by Vodafone and Idea, which is typically called as the 2500 band or 2.5 gigahertz band. Above that, there is like huge opportunity which is actually opening up, right? And the millimeter wave band we are actually targeting for communication is from 24.5 to 29.5. And the next one, which we called as E band and V band, runs from 57 gigahertz all the way up to 100 gigahertz and more. And just to give you a perspective of how smaller this can actually go, Qualcomm 5G millimeter wave antenna module, if you compare it with your phone, these are the two places where they are, and this is the form factor you are looking at. And for comparison, this is like a dime, which is like your 50 paise coin, right? So I can actually pack multiple millimeter wave antenna elements just at the edge of your handset when you decide to do millimeter wave communication. So millimeter wave bands attract large research interest as they can potentially lead to data rate of almost 10 gigabits per second and huge available bandwidth, whereas microwave frequencies are limited to 1 gigabit per second, right? So what I just said is like the most useless statement I could have ever made today. Why do I say so? It's like, again, coming from this diagram directly, because what you have in here is below 3 gigahertz, you have exactly 3 gigahertz bandwidth. In that you have radio, astronomy, you have your the Doordarshan and other terrestrial broadcast bands, and you also have probably 10 megahertz worth of cellular bandwidth available with each operator. The 10 megahertz, even if you can do 10 bits per second per hertz spectral efficiency through MIMO and other related things, the maximum you can go for is 1 gigabit per second speed. Whereas the moment you try to come up with 6 gigahertz or more or 24 gigahertz and other related things, the interesting part is each operator can themselves be given 1 gigahertz spectrum. Same theory, 10 bits per second per hertz, either through MIMO modulation or whatever it is, you will get 10 gigabits per second throughput, right? So that's where the interest in millimeter communication also sparked a lot of interest, because there is huge spectrum available in there which can be exploited to basically offer the very high data rate that is actually needed. To see if there are any questions. Okay, I am assuming Himanshu, the audio issue is solved. Okay. Millimeter wave and microwave difference, is it the spectrum range of frequency? It's almost the same frequencies. I think the applications, they started calling it differently. Microwave communication, typically it was about deep space probes, satellite communication, and other related things. And microwave communication, the theory actually originated from waveguides, right? So I would say 20 years back, when we were learning communication theory, we didn't have digital communication as prominent as now. We had analog communication then. So in analog communication time, we had called that microwave communication. And in a modern digital wave communication thing, when we start exploiting very high, extremely high frequencies, we started calling them millimeter wave, right? So actually, if you ask about to retire physics professor or somebody, for them it's basically the same. How beam tracking is done? It's the same principle, right? So as a user, okay, let's go back to the slide. Okay, in this particular diagram, let's assume each of these users have their own pilot sequence, and using that pilot sequence, they are basically transmitting in the uplink. And because of the pilot, the base station can actually do at least two things. First thing is using your unique code that it knows that it is you. Second, based on what statistical information you are sending, that's like the power in your pilot sequence or something, it can guess which particular location you are in and how far or how close you are to. To answer your question in precision, this tracking is typically done in the field using multiple base stations, or in the absence of multiple base stations, using diversity spaced antennas, right? So if you're actually having antenna elements like this, in which particular case, this element and this element is actually far off, you can treat them as two different transmitters emitting it, which are spaced with at least a certain angle of difference between them. And using concepts like OTDA and other stuff defined in 3GPP, you will be able to do some tracking. Okay. There is actually a separate section on millimeter wave beam tracking itself in NR. If you can actually reach out to me, I can actually point you in that direction later. Okay. So now coming to the last part, which is actually cooperative communication. So this is some work which I did during my PhD days itself, and the good part is it still remains relevant today, right? So in terms of cooperative communication, this classification I had done it 14 years back. I looked into it last week when preparing for this workshop. It still remains relevant. Of course, some of them had been rebranded and then called differently, but this is as much as you can go. If you are using non-codebook pre-coding based schemes, then you can do distributed control or centralized control. If you are using pre-coding based, then you have centralized user data or distributed user data, and then the different forms. But the baseline is the following. So the simplest of the centralized beamforming or the coordinated beamforming is the following. All the user data and all the user channel state information is available at a central location. Those are then connected through high-speed fiber or whatever to the towers. And those towers, then using the knowledge of everybody's data and everybody's channel state information, communicates to the user in the most efficient manner. Most efficient manner in the sense, it can actually avoid interference because it's like a genie. It knows everything in the system, right? A theoretical optimization problem sort of. This is applicable and relevant only for a broadcast channel. You can't do it for a multi-access channel. And the framework change needed that it cannot be decoupled with the localized coordinations. Then the next important thing that came was what is called as interference alignment. What is meant by interference alignment? if you actually have a hexagonal system like this, you have your decide signal going, and then you have interference signal coming in. If you just deal them as phases, then what you're actually having is there is a signal direction and then there is an interference signal. As you can see, there are two things that need to be done. First thing is you have to align the interference using the antenna dimension through channel knowledge, through feedback, and ensure that the composite interference is in the null of the signal, in the direction of the null of the signal. And that is not sufficient. You also need to ensure that you are actually steering the beam in the direction of the user. So this is like the fundamental thing. If you know the channel state information, interference need to go to the null space, and your signal space, you need to ensure that you are doing the equivalent of beamforming in there. The problem is the simultaneous collinearity, it cannot be possible, because what is good for you might be bad for somebody else. And then sooner or later, this becomes like a huge scale optimization problem if you are actually dealing it in a large network. So we called it nonlinear optimization or huge optimization problem 10 years back. What you guys call as ML can solve it or AI can solve it today. So a huge optimization problem is all that you need for ML and others to deal with. Okay. So in the next 4 slides, what I am basically trying to do is explain the work I did as part of these 2 publications 10 years back, to be honest, and then explain why that is still valid and why or how that actually connects with your theme of the workshop, the training session you are doing, application of AI ML into practical things, right? So the system model, you actually have K cells. There are like each cell being independently served, each of them having like a B resources. It's like full frequency reuse. And then, I have possibly several different schedules that is possible for each of these base stations. The system equation I am actually trying to optimize is actually complex because there is this signal. Then there is interference, which is actually coming from different base stations. And then there is noise and the residual interference. I have tons and tons of precoders now added into the system, which is actually shaping the signal in the direction of the users. And then I have a set of schedules I need to choose from for a particular band. All I need to know now is there is a particular rate. I need to maximize that rate. To be even more specific, if you are talking about discrete rate, that is, you're actually dealing with modulation and coding schemes and not continuous rates. You are trying to optimize the floor of that rate, which is the discrete rate. And that is the optimization problem we need to solve. To be even more specific, I have as an operator a normalized sum rate where I actually aggregate it over all the bands and all the cells across all users, across all resources, across all the schedules. And the optimization problem to solve is a huge monster like this. Across all the rates, through the choice of precoders, summing upon all the resources that is available, over all the schedules that is possible, maximize this optimization function. This is like a NP problem, non-polynomial problem. It's not possible to solve because of the tight coupling. As I explained, somebody's good precoder will be somebody else's bad precoder. So we figured out that this is not solvable one. And what we instead did was we actually solved it for a special case. In that special case, we basically know that you don't blindly schedule users in the system. You basically schedule them in a manner that if you actually have like a select user in one cell, you try to keep them for in-cell users in the other cell. Extending further, that particular spectrum we are dealing with, we ensured that first we come up with the user scheduling framework. In that user scheduling framework, we made one particular hypothesis. In that hypothesis, in a particular snapshot of frequency, if I am putting a select user in one particular sector, I will ensure that the other 2 sectors will only have in-cell users. Meaning, the choice of user in here and the precoder he will use is not influenced by what others do. Whereas for this particular poor guy, the choice made by these two guys will actually matter. So now I can actually come up with the framework where this particular base station for this resource can actually coordinate with these two sectors surrounding it and then ask them to pick up a particular precoder which is actually good for this guy. Right? So in that limited framework, we were able to actually simplify it a little bit and then take it to the next level, where we told that, we did two things. One is come up with like a practical algorithm to solve this problem. And the second thing is analytically, we were able to show that, as the number of resources tend to infinity and the numbers of users in the system tend to infinity, with a practical code book, I can show I can always find a resource with a particular precoder choice through the schedules that is possible, which is actually win-win-win for everyone. Okay, so this heuristic algorithm followed by statistical variance studies, which we did. When I did my work, it was called as nonlinear optimization. And in 2021, you have methods coming from ML and AI, which can actually solve it efficiently. Right. So if anyone is interested, I would encourage you to please go and look into these two publications, which I have cited in here. One in IEEE communication letters, the other one in the IEEE transaction on wireless communication. Okay. I think with that, we have come to the end of my session. We should be open to take some questions.
I request the participants to post questions if any. Once again, I request the participants.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. It is a very good and informative session, sir. Hello, sir.
Yeah, I can hear. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I want to know that if I used ML in beamforming for beam selection, there is different types of beam are used, and they are basically directional, some horizontal, some vertical. So, which types of features are we include into the ML programming? That is, which types of features, SINR or spectral efficiency, which is better?
Yeah, so it's actually a very, very loaded question. So again, just imagine, right? I can at least explain from my experience. When we actually walk from this particular model into the different optimization questions, we actually moved from precoder optimization to rate optimization. In this particular rate is actually a function of the SNR, or you actually get into SNR optimization itself, right? So the metric you choose is a function of what optimization problem you are actually solving. If you're talking in terms of an operator, then the sum rate is what he will be interested in. So you can either do sum rate, or if you say that, if everyone is actually getting like a fixed rate, then you can just do a simple SNR optimization. I can give you two examples on where each of them will apply. So if you are talking, energy meters, they are actually becoming connected meters nowadays. But the known thing about energy meters is it has exactly one packet worth this much payload to be sent. What we also know is there is like a huge number of houses in the neighborhood which need to send that one packet. So in this particular case, I can actually design beams which can give a reliable SNR to those meters. So in this particular case, I can actually assume SNR to be the metric and then try to optimize that. The second case is I have like your regular broadband communication that need to be offered. There will be some guys who will just use it for voice over LTE or other related things. And then there will be some guys who will be browsing and consuming data on the system. In this particular case, some rate will be a better metric. Right? So there's no single answer to your question. The right answer is what particular problem definition are you tracking, which then translates to what particular use case and then metric you will adapt. Okay.
Thank you, sir. And if I used web communication because it has a greater frequency, that time some rate is better because it is a low coverage area. So obviously interference is less. That's why can I use hum rate as a features in ML?
Yeah, so the typical deployment scenarios for these will be like indoor wireless or like malls.
Yes. Indoor, small cell-based web communication.
Yeah, so in that case, some rate is like a better metric.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Can you suggest latest channel state information techniques?
Hello.
Yes, let me answer this question from Hindumati and then I will take your question. Can you be a little more precise, Hindumati? So are you talking about what are the different approaches to do channel state information, or is that the question?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, go ahead. Yeah. Gnanakumar, I could hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, good afternoon, sir. It was a wonderful presentation, and I was wondering how you are presenting like each and every words and the clear manner. Sir, my question is that there is a myth is there, millimeter wave come to the picture. If you are transmitting to the wireless channel, it going to be attenuated very short distance itself. Is it there, sir?
Okay, so
how could you tackle this problem, sir?
No. So that particular problem is not because of system design.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just give me a minute.
I'm asking in terms of attenuations impairments is there. So in that
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get you to the right formula. You would have come across this Friss free space loss equation, right?
Yeah, sir.
Do you remember how the loss is defined in terms of the frequency?
In terms of distance, you are telling?
Either in terms of wavelength or in terms of the frequency.
Frequency. Yes, sir.
Do you remember that part?
Yeah, I remember.
Right, so I'm just trying to post it here for you in a slide. So here, okay, let's do it. This is the free space.
Yes, sir.
This is the free space predicate, right? So let's just call it lambda wavelength, right?
Okay,
so as this wavelength increases, this actually will decrease because it's actually connected by that negative formula.
Oh.
Right, so it is actually the physics of the problem. You can absolutely do nothing to it.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm out of touch with this academic methods for a while now, Hindumati, if that answers. But in 3GPP, when we designed NR system, what we did was we still rely on reference signals, also known as pilots. So we try to define efficient pilots which have better correlation properties, and that is actually used to get the channel state information if it is a FTD system. In TDD system, we try to design pilots which will ensure that they have best autocorrelation and minimal best cross correlation behavior, so that the reciprocity can be exploited. right? So if you're asking about the latest trends on which particular thing to do, then reciprocity based channel state information and then pilot designing for that is where the research interest is. Okay. Yeah, I think there was one more question somebody asked, right? What is, yeah, okay. What is meant by sum rate capacity? So let's go back to my slide. Let's get into the basic formula. Where is it formula? Yeah, okay. So this particular link, if you look into it, there is a transmitter and then there is a receiver. So there is a particular capacity which is given by C equal to log 2 1 plus rho h squared. We moved from this particular case to MIMO where we had a larger capacity. But the catch again is this capacity is that for a single user. Now what happens if these antennas become part of different users? So what will happen is there will be a capacity corresponding to, where is that figure? Yeah, there will be a capacity corresponding to this guy. There will be a capacity corresponding to this guy. Logically, we can say that, since this guy is closer to the base station, his capacity may be high and this guy's capacity may be low. So the sum of these two capacities, that is the sum capacity. Okay, so that answers your second question, I believe. Okay. Explain energy efficiency in massive MIMO. Okay. Energy efficiency in massive MIMO can be explained using this particular slide I used. Here. Simple thing. I have, let's assume that, in this upper figure, I have exactly one user in the system. That guy is here in this particular point. In the yesteryear's communication system, what happens is if I need to communicate with that particular guy, I need to still use this larger beam. So irrespective of how many users are there in the system, I'm actually wasting power in the direction where there is no user in the system. With massive MIMO or millimeter wave MIMO, whatever flavor you want to call it, if I decide that there is going to be one user in here, I need to switch on exactly the central beam and not the beams on the other directions. Okay, so that basically means I don't have to waste energy in the direction where there is nobody at all. That will actually bring in my energy efficiency. Okay. Precoders used to handle loss. So precoder is not necessarily, it's a different way of stating it. What precoders do is precoders try to do two things. One, it tries to create beamforms which actually send in the direction of the user. And the second part is it also tries to ensure that the interference going into the other users is actually minimized, right? So remember the cooperative precoding information, the interference alignment I mentioned. There are two design objectives. You pick up precoders so that the interference is actually sent towards the null space. And the precoders also ensure that you have the best beamforming gains possible. Okay. Yeah. I think we have answered all the questions. If there are any left, let me know. I can actually take them. Otherwise.
Yeah, I think there are no questions, sir.
Okay, good.
Just a minute. Thank you, sir. It was an excellent and very interactive session. And I think all the participants, they gained a lot of information about MIMO and millimeter wave. Importantly, thank you for introducing cooperative MIMO concepts where we can explore a lot of information. And those who are interested, they can choose it as your research area also. And you have patiently cleared all the doubts. Once again, I thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure. Thank you. And I think this is going for one more week, right? So wishing all the participants a very good workshop.
Yes, sir.